Hey everybody, we are going to take a look at the Garmin Zumo 396. This is the box. It is a motorcycle specific GPS unit made by Garmin. I put it on that motorcycle right there. I'm going to show you how I did it. I'm going to take you through some features. We're going to talk about what it's well suited for, what it's not. I'll give you some pros and cons. And by the end of the video, I'm going to tell you whether or not I think it's worth the price point and whether or not I would recommend it. All that coming up right now. All right, so first things first, let's get to a couple of the specifics. Specifically, the name of this GPS unit is the Garmin Zumo 396 LMT-S. Now, this is a motorcycle specific GPS. As I mentioned, it does come with handlebar mounting accessories. Pretty much work for most motorcycle handlebars. As long as you've got some space to do it. Garmin does also have a cool little brake reservoir mount type thing that you can integrate into it if you're really tight on space. It does require 12-volt power. There is a battery back in the unit. Garmin says it'll last up to 4 hours. I wouldn't take it on more than an hour-long ride without having a way to charge it. That's just me. I mean, if you're going to depend on this thing, make sure you have appropriate power for it. It does have a removable cradle. I'll show you how that pops in and out in just a second. What I mean by that is you can actually pop the GPS in and out of the cradle. The cradle itself isn't removable, but the GPS unit is, so that it doesn't get stolen. And there's a cool little water cover for that as well. You don't have to leave the power supply plugged into your bike all the time if you're worried about that. We'll get into that here shortly in the video. I should also mention that this motorcycle specific GPS unit does have some non-pavement options. So if you're into maybe dual sport or doing some other kinds of things on two wheels off-road, there are some customizable features in the settings of this unit that will accommodate that. It's not just for pavement. It's got full smartphone integration. It will integrate with your helmet radio if you have a helmet Bluetooth setup in addition to your smartphone, which I found to be a pretty cool feature. It's weather resistant, so if you leave it out in the rain, Garmin has you covered there. It's also got traffic integration. Now you've got to have a smartphone connection for that to be able to work, but you can get live traffic updates. I really like that feature, especially in situations where you're on a motorcycle and you can maybe cut off on a side road and avoid a bunch of traffic. You've got a smaller vehicle, you've got the ability to do that. All right, so that said, let's take a look at the actual unit. All right, let's get to it here. All right, so obviously in the box, we're gonna have the actual module itself, power button right here, USB port here. That looks like a mini USB port. And on the top part, we have looks like an SD card slot there. Some contacts back here. Set that off to the side. See what else is in the box. All right, we've got our constant power cable there. For those of you wondering, by the way, it's 10 to 30 volts, 1.5 amp max on that. And then we've got the mounting system, which we will unpackage here in just a little bit. It's got some small U-bolts, it looks like, as well as Garmin's infamous ball mount. And a dock for the unit itself, some screws, that USB cable that fits the unit, and of course, the instructions. So one of the options that Garmin gives you, and they've got separate booklets, one is an instruction for installation, and the other one is a quick start to operate the unit itself. One of the cool things that Garmin allows you to do is you got some spacers and bolts there, but this little guy right here has a handlebar cut out, and it will actually mount to your clutch base on some motorcycles, actually probably a lot of motorcycles, or on the brake clamp side. So these pass-through holes right here allow you to take out your existing clutch or brake clamp screws, put this in its place, and then put these put the screws back in. You may need to use longer screws to accomplish that, but it's a clever location if you don't have a lot of space on your handlebars. There you go. All right, guys, so we're here in my garage. Sorry for the shaky footage. I'm trying to freehand this, but I've got a tip for you as we go to install this GPS unit. Most motorcycles have a smaller battery, and I personally get pretty nervous about leaving things connected to that battery that are always on or that can always draw power, because there's very little headroom in a lot of these motorcycle batteries for drain. So my suggestion is, a lot of you already have a battery tender on your bike or a battery tender connection. Basically, it's a trickle charge quick disconnect, and that looks something like this right here. Now, if you've got one of these, let me pull the cap off of it so you can see. Again, trying to do this with one hand, but that's what they look like. Okay, get a little bit of a close up there. Trying to get the camera to focus. All right, there you go. Now you can see it. All right, so if you already have one of these quick disconnects that's already going to your battery, you can go buy some cables that have that same quick disconnect, and they look like that. And I've just got another one laying here. It's a smaller gauge wire, and you can cut and crimp and splice those into your Garmin cable, and that will let you quick disconnect your Garmin cable and then plug your battery tender in when it's parked in your garage. Food for thought on that. I'll put a link to the cables that I use to do this, and I'll show you how I do it. All right, so this is the cradle, and there's a release button here. That is the top of the cradle. The cradle actually mounts this way, not this way, with that being up, okay? This is the power cable that if you're not gonna use like a SIG plug or a standard USB plug with a regular mini USB cable, you would use this to wire it. For example, if you're gonna use one of these quick disconnects that I mentioned, you would use this cable right here, which comes in the kit. Now, this has a cover over it, and it's important to note that there is a little screw hole on the very back, and this is going to be too tiny for the camera to pick up, but on the very back of this cable right here, there's a little screw hole. Taped to this bracket, this cradle, you should have, like I had, a little green piece of tape right there, and on the back of that little green piece of tape is the screw. So you don't want to lose that, and if you ripped that piece of tape off thinking it was trash, it's not. Go get it and go get the screw that was attached to it. All right? Save that screw. Before you do use the screw though, what you need to do is take your cradle, take your power cord, start from behind the cradle. So this is the front where the GPS is going to mount. This is the back, and I'm going to take my cord and I'm going to put the screw hole, as I'm looking at this from behind it, the screw hole's in the top right corner, and I'm going to push it through. Okay. It's going to be a tight fit. It's going to be snug. Okay, now that I've got it through, I'm going to slide it down to that bottom area, and then I'm going to pull it snug. And it should be almost flush. Okay, it sticks out just a little bit. It's almost flush there. And my screw holes line up in the back here, and I'm going to take that little screw and I'm going to screw it in to secure this cable. Okay guys, take a look here. This is how I ended up with my Ducati Monster. Now, all bikes are different. This is just a suggestion. There's a lot of ways you can do this. Show you how I did it on mine. So I've got the cradle and I've just got the cord for now draped here. And what I did was I used a Velcro tie wrap like that. And on this bike that has an exposed frame, I can go around and just secure it to the frame here like that, a couple times around, and I'm good for the trip. Now, a couple things to note. Don't put the cords or wires anywhere where it might touch the engine or exhaust or anything that can get hot, because those will melt. So be mindful of that. And in my case, I can just unplug this and I can take that thumb screw loose and take the whole cradle off. I'm not going to leave this on the bike all the time, so I see no harm in my case in just leaving the wires hang during a ride. Just going to use it for longer rides. You can do a more permanent mount depending on the bike and depending on how much you want to use it, but this allows me to use that disconnect that I hooked up right here and take it completely loose and take it completely off when I'm not riding with the GPS. All right, so this is what the actual cradle on the unit looks like, and you can see here there's a little weather cover for your contacts to keep those from getting wet and corroding, and then it tucks back under the unit. There's a quick release around the back here. It's actually on the bottom. I've got to shift hands, but it's right there if we can get a look at it. And that pops the latch to release the actual GPS unit. This is the unit in my hands. All right, so to attach the GPS to the dock, I'm just going to put it in. This is actually kind of tricky to do one-handed, but I'm going to go left side to right side. So I put the left side in first, and then it's docked and it powered right on. You can see that. This thing also has, and you see that warning that popped up right there initially was a fuel warning. My bike does not have a fuel gauge. It does have a low fuel light, but that's it. So I have to kind of know, when I get to certain mileage that I need to check fuel. This thing will actually track your stops, and it's really cool. When you stop, sometimes it'll say, hey, did you fuel up? And you can go in advance and you can set the settings and you can tell it how big your gas tank is, and it will start warning you when you're getting low, and it can even present you with some fuel station or gas station options. So that's a really cool motorcycle specific feature. All right, and as far as finding areas of interest or points of interest, it does a really good job there. You've got gas station options in the where to. You can search by category, you can search by address. I will show you, now this is something, it does work fairly well with gloves on, but something that Garmin does here, and obviously they had to do it because of the size of the screen, the real estate they had here. If you go and do an address search, and you know the house number. So for example, I'm just going to throw in just a test here, and then I'm going to jump over. If I go to the actual keyboard, you can see that keyboard is split. So I don't have all of my letters here. To get to the other half of the keyboard, I've got to hit this right arrow, and then it takes me back to that. So if you're spelling words, sometimes you have to jump back and forth on the keyboard, and it's a little bit annoying, but honestly, how often are you going to do that? And it's a fair trade-off for me on a smaller screen. I think it's worth it. Built into the unit also is TripAdvisor, Foursquare, and parking finding. So if you need any of those features or you're familiar with those features, you've got them. Some of the other features that I think are pretty great on this, if we go into the settings and take a look, of course, you've got your typical updates that Garmin likes to do through the apps and whatnot. And then you've got your various Bluetooth connectivity options, Wi-Fi and whatnot. If we go into navigation, we can take a look at this feature that Garmin has that's called Garmin Adventurous Routing. And you can actually go in there and you can tell it, you can see on here, hey, I want to avoid major highways. Maybe I've got a light bike, or I just am not comfortable riding on the highways. How many twisties do you want? How many hills do you want? And I have found in my riding that this thing finds roads that I didn't even know existed, and it can be a lot of fun. You can tell it if you prefer off-road routes or whether to avoid those as well. You can avoid carpool lanes, unpaved roads, and so on, right? Toll roads, it's all in there, okay? And then you can even go in and set your, this is what I was talking about earlier. You can go in and set some of your vehicle preferences, including your fuel tank and all that. One other kind of cool hidden feature here that I'll mention is if you tap up here on the top of the screen, you can get into, oops, I missed it. You can set the type of vehicle that you have. It will do automobiles, take note everybody, and you can switch to off-road. It will do those as well. And then if I go up here to the gas tank option, I've got that feature that I mentioned earlier about resetting the fuel tank and what Garmin calls dynamic fuel stops, which basically just suggests, and it's a little bit of a learning system that the unit has where it learns my stops. And I've got my distance set here as well. And then it'll give me a remaining fuel warning, and I can set that amount. It's pretty easy to pop this thing out of the cradle or the dock and throw it into your pocket if you need to be able to do that and run in the store if you're worried about it getting stolen. I mean, honestly, it's a little bit thicker than a smartphone, but it's also a little bit shorter. So if that gives you an idea there, and you can see the thickness of it compared to my phone, but it's not bad. It'll fit easily in a coat pocket if you have a riding jacket, anything like that. I like it there. It's a little hefty. It's got a rubber coating. I think those are all positives. I would recommend this unit to just about anybody that enjoys riding a motorcycle, either on medium to longer trips, meaning you're gonna go more than 30 miles and you wanna do a little adventuring, or anybody that is doing dual sport or a hybrid of on-road, off-road and is looking to take some mild to moderate trails that aren't single track. Meaning, you know, it's a little bit wider. It will even, hey, if you want to put it in your Jeep or your Bronco or your off-road vehicle and do some overlanding in it, it's going to do a great job with that as well. And I just think the advantage of being able to quickly say, hey, here's my planned route, here are my points of interest, here are my stopping points, find me gas stations on the way so that I don't end up stranded, it's a huge plus. And I just love the ability to integrate this with my headset, with my helmet headset. I think that that's going to beat, hands down, a smartphone headset combination any day, because I'm free to have those phone calls on my phone that's paired to the same headset, in addition to hearing the directions here, not having to do a one or the other scenario, being able to listen to music on my phone, not doing a one or the other scenario there either. I've always got my directions talking at me when I need them. And you know what, if I want to silence that, I can look down and see it on the Garmin while I'm on a phone call, which sometimes can be a little bit trickier on smartphones, especially if your smartphone is a few years old or older. All right, so let's talk a little bit about who I think this would be good for. Now, yes, you have options like Waze that you can use, and I've even done that where I've got my phone in my pocket, but I've got it paired to the Bluetooth headset in my helmet, and I can use that for directions. The problems that you run into with that sometimes are if you need to make a change, if you need to quickly redirect, if you run into traffic, you have to sometimes be able to touch that phone. And if you don't have a phone cradle or you don't want to leave your phone out in the weather to be able to do that, you're stuck. And that's where this really shines. It's weather rated. If a rainstorm comes up, you can leave it out. You're not worried about it. You're also not going to drain your phone battery. You've got this thing powered by your vehicle, by the 12-volt power. Or you can run it on battery and save your phone battery. So I think having a dedicated GPS is a very good thing to have, but I wouldn't stop there. I would say it has to be able to offer features that are a little bit better than what you can get maybe in a Waze or a Google Maps or an Apple Maps. And I would say it definitely does that. So having that motorcycle specific feature of being able to find the fun twisties, which this thing does very well, and I will tell you that I've done that many times and I've giggled out loud. It's been so great. So it definitely shines in those categories. I have a smaller bike. This isn't, you know, an 1100cc motorcycle, so I have a limited real estate. It does a good job. It's just big enough that I can work with it, but it's not so big that it gets in the way of the limited real estate that I have on the handlebars. So I think it's a win on that side as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about where I wouldn't use this. I wouldn't use this on a trails bike, on a bike that is a woods bike, a bike that rides single track. You know, some of you guys that are out there riding single track do it in pretty remote areas, and it is good to have GPS. I'm not saying this can't do it. I'm just saying that's a lot of tree branches and sticks and things that are on single track that I would just be worried could do some damage. So if it were me, this would probably not be the option for that. It is sturdier than your typical Garmin. It is more rugged than your typical Garmin. But for the cost, I just think it's too big of a risk. These come in between $350 and $400. That's what the unit prices out at. If you're interested in getting one, check for a link in the description. We'll make sure you've got it. But I probably wouldn't put it on a dedicated woods or an MX bike. That's just my opinion. There you go. I would consider putting it in a Jeep or an off-road vehicle that has a dash. I see no issue with using something like this over maybe a traditional car pavement GPS because it's built for the abuse. If you leave the cover off your Jeep or your Bronco or your Toyota or whatever you're using and it gets wet, no big deal. It's definitely rated for that. And not to mention, if you leave that cover off and you want to pop this thing off and take it inside, you can do that as well. As to the question of whether I would buy one of these or whether I think it is worth the $350 to $400 for this unit, yes, I actually do. I think Garmin did a good enough job with this that if you do enough motorcycle riding at all, and most of you probably ride more than me, if I'm being honest, I love it. I love the ability to go chart out bike-specific routes. I just think that cannot be beaten, and that is not something today that Google Maps will do for you. I think it's worth it. Now, if you're looking for one GPS unit to rule them all, this may not be it, depending on what your other methods of transportation are. But I think it's a good contender if you've got a bike or two, and I think you should give it a serious look. All right, guys, before we cut, I just wanted to say thank you for watching. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If it has, please remember to give us a like, tell a friend, leave a comment if you have a question. We try to check those. If you're interested in buying this unit, use the link we've given you. Check out our website, partscounterguru.com. We've got a full podcast in that, as well as lots of other great links, articles. You can find all of our other videos on our YouTube channel. Be safe out there. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.